Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. I do apologize about last week. I did have a bit of a bug. Maybe I should have put something out there that I have a bit of a bug, but I was too under the weather to even do that. But anyway, I'm here this evening. Um, this evening, I'm going to be looking at something I talk about a lot, and that's how narcissistic people, narcissism needs an audience. Narcissism can't really function without an audience. Narcissistic people need an audience. They need people to collude with them. They need people to buy into their fantasies, to validate how special and wonderful they are. So this evening, I thought I'd be looking at how they go about this. When you think of how much information is out there on narcissistic personality, narcissistic behaviors, and yet so many of us fall for it again and again. We keep falling under their spell. We believe their promises and things like that. So let me put it to you this way. If you know a narcissistic person, maybe you've been in a relationship with them, maybe you're related to them, or they're a friend of yours, or maybe you work with them, but you're in a room, maybe at some social functioning, and you know how self-absorbed they are, how toxic they are, and so on, and yet they seem to be the friendliest person in the room, and everyone's really getting on with them. Everyone's laughing at their jokes and things like that. And you might be wondering to yourself, why is no one saying what they're really like, or why are they not like this with me? Because you've experienced the manipulation, the put downs, the sarcasm, the unkind humor. No one else is seeing it. And it can make you question your own sanity. But the thing is, if that was someone you met, again, like maybe a workplace, or it was someone you got involved with romantically, if you remember, that's how they were with you when you first met. Okay. They were charming, they were witty, they were really caring about you, and so on. They were really interested in you. They had great ideas, they had a great future ahead of them, and they wanted to take you with them, and so on. Because if they were to behave how they really truly are the first time someone meets someone, chances are they're not going to get a second go, if you know what I mean. If I put it to you this way, narcissistic people are really, really good at making first impressions. Again, they can be charming, witty, funny, they can be altruistic, they can be intelligent, they can be a lot of different things. And that's generally how they reel people in. But like I said, narcissism needs an audience, it needs people. Narcissists feed off other people's reactions, whether that's positive or whether that's negative. They'll feed off those positive reactions maybe in the early stages. They feed off the negative reactions later on as things start to go bad. So why do they need other people? Well, it's because inside they're kind of hollow. The version they've created for themselves of themselves tends to be very fragile. They need other people to prop up this version of them that they have created. So they need admiration, they might need fear, they might need pity, they might need envy, whatever it is. They might not want people, they might want people laughing at their jokes, laughing at their humor, even their unkind humor towards other people. And all of this is what's known as their narcissistic supply. This is how they're fed. Without that supply, they start to deflate quite quickly. So everybody in that room are more than just spectators. What they're doing is they are feeding that person. They're feeding their ego. They're feeding their need for attention. And in some ways, again, when we talk about things like enablers, flying monkeys, and so on, sometimes they become tools in a manipulative game, sometimes even unwitting tools, because they don't always know that they're being manipulated. Now, the thing is as well, it can be difficult to sometimes spot the difference between someone who's maybe putting on a performance, they're being charismatic and so on, they're being charming, they're being witty. It can be difficult to sometimes see the difference between a performance and someone who is genuinely like that. It's just their nature. It's how they are. Because in both cases, they can seem quite magnetic, if you will. They can be well spoken. They can be genuinely funny, genuinely caring. They could genuinely be a confident kind of person. And people tend to be drawn to them. But like I said a moment ago, when it comes to winning over new people, winning over crowds, and so on, narcissistic people can be very good at making first impressions. If I put it to you this way, you imagine someone like a cult leader, okay? People don't just fall for what is maybe an obvious lie or what they can clearly see as a facade. What they do is they meet someone who is intelligent, someone who is really into doing good things, doing the right thing. They might be spiritually awakened, if you want to put it that way. They could be, again, they could be very kind, they could be very altruistic. So they put forward this version of themselves, and they know what to do, they know what to say in order to reel people in. And just as I'm saying that, I'm thinking it was Mark Vicente, I believe, said it. No one joins a cult. Okay, if the people know it's a cult, they generally don't want to get involved. No one joins a cult. They join what they think is a good thing that is doing good things. Okay, and that's the nature of the cult leader. Okay, they're very good at persuasion. In the early stages, it's persuasion. Later on, it becomes more about coercion. And the same could be said for that person in work as well. If they just behaved like a megalomaniac, chances are they wouldn't get anywhere. But they seem to know what they're doing. They pretend they get on well with the staff. They understand the issues. They're very forward thinking and so on. And even in relationships, whenever you meet someone, you start dating someone, nobody ever meets somebody and says, well, they seem really deluded and very selfish. They'll do me. No, they meet someone who's very charming, really kind, really nice. There's a lot of very attractive qualities about them. Because again, when it goes back to the first impressions, even in certain situations, as we often say, there's two faces of narcissism. There's the public face and there's the private face. The people closest to them, the people at home, see a very different version of them from what the public see, because again, narcissists are very good at what I've heard referred to as impression management. Okay, so they can be very good. Some can be very good at reading people. They read social cues, so they're able to build this public persona that's designed to be admired, that's designed to have people believe that they are good people. You know, they could be singing in the choir or whatever. They could be doing voluntary work. They could be really into some very worthy cause. They could be doing all manner of great things, but it's all impression management. At home, they're cold, they're distant, they can be neglectful, they can be abusive, they can be a lot of different things. They're only focused on how the outside world is seeing them. Okay. But even when you meet them, in order to reel you in and persuade you, especially if it's getting into some kind of a cult-like movement, or they're trying to get something from you, you know, even if it's a date or something, when they're talking to you, they can speak with total conviction. They might have amazing stories to reel people in. Sometimes what you might find these are other people's stories that they found very interesting and very clever and very witty, and they saw those stories got a good reception, so they take on those stories as their own. Sometimes they will embellish those stories. They will make those stories either about them, how good they did at something, or how badly they were treated. Okay. Again, there's a term for it that I heard called transactional charisma. Okay, so there is the charm, there is the amazing stories, there is the speaking with confidence and so on, but it's all with an agenda. And that agenda is all to feed their own ego, to get their own narcissistic supply. Because remember, without other people, they tend to deflate. So, one moment, just take a little drink. Now, where did I get to? What was I talking about? Yeah, it's all about getting their narcissistic supply. So whenever they do meet someone new, or if you see them on social media, or you see them talking at a public event, you see them at a social event or whatever, they're not really showing people who they really are. They're showing a very carefully constructed version of themselves. That's where you see things like flattery, laughing at jokes, asking about how the kids are, showing concern for this, that, and the other. What about your great aunt? Did she get that thing sorted out? And so on. And as much as they want to be seen as special in those early stages, they're trying to make other people feel seen and feel special, to hook them in, to be able to feed off them later on. Again, when you meet people like this for the first time, you'll get questions, and sometimes they might seem like innocent questions, and they could well be. Sometimes they might be just looking for information. They might ask very careful questions because they're looking for things specific. They might even ask about difficulties you're experiencing and things like that, or this terrible thing you've been through, or this person you care about. They're not necessarily asking because they care. They want to know information. They're trying to figure out what you value, what other people value, what your hopes are, what your dreams are, what your secret embarrassments are, your shame. They want to know what your insecurities. All of this is being kept to be used at a later date. Again, going back to that image management and so on, they're very good at mirroring other people, and they can reflect your values back to you. If you thought something was really hurtful, really painful, or very unfair, oh, they will, yeah, absolutely, that was really bad. That was awful. That should never have happened. And I hope you get that sorted, and I hope you feel better soon. Which later on, the more you get to know them, doesn't matter what you've been through. You could have been through hell. They don't really care because it's not on their radar. It doesn't bother them. It's nothing to do with them. Go and sort it out yourself. But in those early stages, they are looking for a connection, any kind of connection, trying to give the facade of maybe a deep connection, which in reality, narcissists tend to be quite superficial. They're only really surface level connections. But in those early stages, they can be very good at trying to make it look as if a deep connection is being created. So again, people see someone who is confident, engaging, caring. They might be successful. They might have ambition. Pardon me. But again, it's just that they're trying to project onto other people what those other people find valuable, what those other people find attractive, what those other people like, what those other people might feel as if is lacking in their lives. They're trying to present that to make themselves more attractive. Okay. Now, my mind starts to wander and I forget to where I get to. So what I was going to say there. Yeah. In those early stages, as I said, there might be a lot of flattery in someone. There might be a lot of praise. But again, it's not necessarily for that person, for you, or for the person they're praising, even though there might be a little bit of that because they want something from you. It could be for the bigger audience, okay? It's for everyone in the room to see what a great person they are. It's for everyone else in the room to see how generous they are offering to help. It's for everyone else to think they are a great person, because as they're looking at you, and as they're talking to you, it's like the rest in their peripheral vision, they're looking at everybody else. How am I coming across right now? How am I looking? What are people thinking of me? Have people noticed me? Do I need to speak up a bit? Do I need to make maybe more grandiose kind of gestures just to get the attention? So even when they're talking to that person, yeah, it's like they're watching everybody else in the room. So in those early stages, yeah, you might meet someone who's very confident, very charismatic, and so on. But there is another side to it as well, which is common with what they would call covert narcissism. And that's when you get someone who has this constant kind of perpetual victimhood. Okay. And this is all about weaponizing other people's empathy and their sympathy. The grandiosity, and this is something I will be talking about shortly in a video coming out this week. The grandiosity is still there. Okay, the difference is the grandiosity is internalized. You might get grandiose kind of behavior about how victimized they are and how awful everything is and so on. But a lot of the time, it's this: the world is so unfair because no one is seeing how great they are. They're being so hard done by, they've been cheated out of everything in the world. Okay, so there's this constant sense of victimhood where they're trying to get people's sympathy and their empathy. It is also another element of that victimhood is about dodging accountability and responsibility. They will paint other people as being the aggressor in their lives. In fact, even whenever they get called out for bad behavior, the fact that they have been called out is evidence that they are being victimized. Okay, it's got nothing to do with what they did. It's how they are being treated. It's how they are being called out and so on. They immediately become the victim. Because with covert narcissism, pretty much everything that happens to them that they don't like is deeply unfair and very unjust. That's where you often find a lot of exaggerations, exaggerating things that have happened to them. Stories of hardship. There's been betrayal. There's been a lot of mistreatment. There's been a lot of unfairness. There's been a lot of sacrifice. They have sacrificed so much for someone or for some people, only to be unappreciated and discarded. Again, it's about preying on people's compassion, that empathy and compassion of good, decent people. Because narcissistic people know that others have that, and they will exploit it just to get the attention. Again, any kind of attention is better than none. Which is why you hear stories about every place they've ever worked. There's always been horrible bullies or narcissistic managers. Every person they've ever dated has mistreated them or betrayed them somehow. Everybody in the world hurts them. Okay, everything is so unfair. Their kids are ungrateful. Their kids don't want anything to do with them, so the kids must be ungrateful or whatever. That person who left them, how could they leave me when I was in such a terrible state, and so on. What you find is there's generally a lot of drama, but the thing is, remember, the stories are often delivered with such conviction. If it's the first time you're hearing them, they can sound and feel completely real, especially if they've rehearsed these stories so many times. Now, as I say, that acting the victim in order to get attention serves different purposes. It is about getting pity, sympathy, things like that. It's about deflecting responsibility because they're the one who's always being wronged. They're never at fault for their own abusive, maladaptive, destructive behavior. If you will, they use their stories of hardship and betrayal and things like that almost like it's a get out of jail free card. You know, again, people who are compassionate and sympathetic and so on, nobody wants to hurt someone who is already hurting. Okay, which is why they tend to give them, give them a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, or whatever. But then the sub stories are also like a tool for manipulation, because when they give stories of hardship and how vulnerable and weak they are and how badly they've been treated and all the issues they have to deal with, it is a way of guilt tripping people into giving them what they want or doing things for them. And what you might find a lot of the time with covert narcissists is what they do is they give you their pain, and it's up to you to make them better. It's up to you to nurture them. It's up to you to make things better for them. You have to protect them from the horrible world. You have to manage their triggers for them. So if you find yourself managing, modifying your own behavior, not using certain words around them, not using certain language, not asking for certain things, not calling them out, because that's going to trigger how much pain they're in, and so on. You don't want to make things worse for them. Because empathetic people tend to get sucked into those pity ploys at first, certainly at first. After a while, I think all of us, we begin to see the things they say don't match the things they do. Sometimes their stories change, they become more embellished. Sometimes it becomes about something else. Sometimes it's in a different situation with a different person. Sooner or later, people start to see through that. But one way or another, sorry, I'm just losing my track of thought. But anyway, one way or another, it's all about them getting attention and care. They want others to help them. And a lot of times we get conned into helping them, doing things for them that sometimes they're more than capable of doing themselves. One of the ways they can use their fears, their vulnerabilities, and tap into other people's empathy, it's a way of isolating other people. Okay. I don't like social gatherings, for instance, or I don't know, more to the point. It's not that let me start that again. It's not that I don't like social gatherings. I don't like social gatherings with your friends and your family there. Okay. With people that you know there. Okay. Because all of those people don't like me. All of those people trigger me. All of those people bring things up in me. And you find yourself moving further and further away from your support network, from people who care about you, people who like you, people who could maybe see there is something going on with you. And also, the more you find yourself being isolated, the easier it is for a narcissistic person. I'll explain what I mean by this. The easier it is for a narcissistic person to actually paint you as the abuser. Okay. The person that they're hurting is being abusive. That's where you get things like smear campaigns. That's because there's no one around you. No one has really got to see what's actually going on. So they're only really getting that narcissistic person's perspective. So they could be saying about what a horrible person you or someone else is, that they're doing this, that, and the other. And then by the time you go to them and you try to tell them what's really going on, this image has already been put in their head. This narrative has already been put in their head. So they think that you're the crazy one and you're trying to actually smear them. So, sorry, it's just come into my head as well. And I've talked about this many times. What they can do as well is when they're behaving in such a way. Now, again, it could be with their grandiosity, their need for entitlement and things like that, their demands for perfection from you, from undying love and devotion from you, and things like that. Or they could be in that perpetual state of vulnerability. So they want you to give up this to look after them. They want you to stop doing this because it bothers them somehow. But then if you stand up for yourself, or you say, no, that would like to do this, it's in my best interest, I'll only be about half an hour, I'm doing something. Even if you raise your voice, which could be a normal reaction to provocation, even if they're continually insulting you and sabotaging you and so on, then they'll point out your reaction. And that is proof that you might explode, you might lose your temper, you might be sarcastic, you might do or you might say something in front of other people because you've been pushed so far. They now have evidence. Do you see what I have to put up with? Do you see that temper? See, I'm always on eggshells around them. Do you see why they're always doing this to me? And again, you're left feeling as if you're going crazy because no one is seeing the full picture. No one is seeing the full thing. Not everybody's going to recognize this isn't a one-off event and you're being unreasonable. This is a long-term series of events. This is something that's been rewriting your reality. This has been something that's been slowly eroding you a piece at a time. So even if we do raise our voice, and this is the thing, we are responsible for our behavior, regardless if it's a reaction or not, but even raising our voice, which could well be a normal reaction, as I say, that is confirmation of how aggressive you are. Again, real victims are left feeling disbelieved, they're feeling alone, they're feeling trapped, and they're trapped in a false narrative that they think other people seem to believe. And I emphasize that they think other people believe. Some will, not necessarily everyone. Now, let's actually talk about the enablers themselves. Remember, they cannot function without enablers. They need enablers. So in order to boost their control, to feed their ego, to boost their narrative and things like that, they'll have different kinds of supporters. Sometimes you'll call them flying monkeys, based on the Wizard of Oz movie, those creepy little critters with the waistcoats and the hats and stuff. Um, I like to call them enablers. Sometimes I would call them agents, agents of the narcissist, but there are different kinds. Okay. First of all, there would be the benevolent enabler, and that's someone who maybe acts in good faith. They're well meaning. Okay. So they have been totally fooled by the narcissist's narrative and their charm or their victim act. And they might actually think they're helping a good person who has been wronged. They might actually think they're trying to reconcile two people who have just had a bit of a tiff or whatever. They're really naive, okay? Um, and what they might think they're doing, they might be saying things like, they're really worried about you, the way you've been behaving lately, and they don't know what you're up to, and they said that you might do this to yourself or you might do this to someone else, and they're really concerned. And the whole time you're thinking to yourself, none of this is real. This is absolutely insane. None of this is. So they could be quite naive. They think they're trying to help. Either that, maybe they just don't like conflict. Okay, so they're trying to maybe mediate somehow. They're trying to pass messages on to each other. Sometimes, again, if they think that the narcissistic person is the one who has been hurt and the one who's been betrayed and so on, again, there could be a naivety there, but they could be very defensive. They want to help because they believe that person, because of what they've been told, they believe that person really has been wounded. Okay. That's when you hear things like, and I think this is the worst thing, even when it comes from an innocent place, a naive place. I think the worst things any victim of abuse, narcissistic abuse, any kind of abuse can hear is things like, well, there are two sides to every story. Or, look, I know they can be a bit, whatever, but they have been through a lot. Or even saying things like, well, I've never seen that side, and they're not like that with me. Again, it might come from a good place, but it's probably the last thing someone who's been on the wrong end of a narcissist wants to hear. Because as far as they're concerned, everyone has been fooled by this expert liar, if you will. So anyway, that's the benevolent, the person who thinks they're doing something good, the person who thinks they're helping. But then there are more malevolent enablers. And these are people who you probably find have very dark personality traits themselves. Okay. They might go along with the abuse because it gives them a kick. There's a sadistic side to them. They like to see other people in pain and misery. They feed off the drama. Even though it's someone else's drama, they're feeding off it and they love to keep it going because they just love that turmoil. They might also get maybe a sense of power, if you will, from siding with who they believe is the most dominant person rather than who is right and who is wrong. But the malevolent type will spread rumors. They will listen to a lot of rumors, believe them. They will join in smear campaigns. Like I say, a lot of the time they take pleasure in people's pain and misery. It's the sadistic side of the dark personality. They're not fooled. They haven't been lied to. They probably know what is reality. They probably know what is true. But they are actually willing accomplices. Okay. They don't want to hear your side. They're not interested in your side. They would very quickly devalue your side just because they like to see people in pain and misery. Then there's another kind of enabler, and they are those who are fearful. There are those who probably know what that person's like. They collude with them because they fear that wrath being turned on them. Okay. Now, they might try and keep out of it. They might try and stay away. But if they find themselves being reeled in, they might find themselves believing they have to do favors, passing on a message or trying to get a bit of information on behalf of for the narcissist from you. And again, a lot of the time that is fear. And sometimes what you find with those who are fearful can be, and you'll find this in cults, and you'll find this in families, you'll find this in workplaces and so on. It's like sometimes they've been so brainwashed or even terrorized. The thought of holding in their head for a moment that narcissist is a bad person, that's dreadful for them. I mean, they're terrified. They cannot hold in their head for a moment any bit of reality. They'll find themselves even excusing bad behavior. Oh, but again, what happened to that person was so awful. You shouldn't be so hard on them. And sometimes it's I've met people like this. You might have met them yourself. It's almost like they're afraid that the narcissist can read their mind. So they're afraid to even think that this is a horrible, bad person. They just completely reject reality. It's terror. It's as much as I can say. They're absolutely terrorized. Either that or they've been brainwashed into belief. You'll find the brainwashing common in cults and narcissistic families and things like that. They cannot accept that narcissist or is a wrong'un or whatever. Even in the case of cults, you might find a cult leader who gets convicted and sent to prison. There are still members who will still hold on to that belief, again, the narrative that they were told that everyone's out to get him or her. Everyone's trying to take over, everyone's trying to stop them and do things like that. So when they end up getting caught, maybe sent to prison or something like that, they're still holding on to that because it feels easier for them than to believe, no, actually I was lied to the same as everyone else. Now, another way they would use their enablers in order to feed them, to get them what they want, is through triangulation. And this is when they bring in a third person or even other people into the dynamic. So again, it's like I mentioned a moment ago. They might go to someone and they might say, I'm worried about them because of this, that, and the other. I don't know what to do. Now, that puts that third person onto the narcissist side. They start to view the victim differently. Okay. Sometimes they will just create, in their head, other people. I spoke to such and such, and they were shocked that you would behave like that. Other people have been telling me that they're amazed that you would be like this. Again, the person feels as if they're being outnumbered. They feel as if they're being mobbed. They feel that everyone else is believing this narrative. Everyone else is believing this story. Now, so there's the triangulation, bringing in other people into the dynamic to create jealousy, to create instability, to destabilize people, and so on. Now, again, they need people to collude with them. So that's whenever they're triangulating, that's whenever they're creating smear campaigns, that's whenever they're preempting what's going to come. They're trying to isolate people from maybe their social support network. So what they're trying to do is they use the other people, not just to destroy someone's reputation, but also have them try to destroy it as well. So again, they'll plant something in their head. They will tell them a story, often an exaggerated one that they've just created or whatever, but it paints the victim in a very negative light. The victim tries to tell their side of the story, and these people are armed with, albeit false information. Well, that's not what they said. Remember, takes two, all that sort of thing. So again, the person is feeling isolated. Their social support network is starting to diminish because they're believing these other people, remember, have not seen the private face of the narcissist. They've only seen the public face, and that's a lot of the time what they're basing things on. So I need another drink. talk for a long time without drinking. So it's not always easy, as I said, to spot someone who is genuinely charismatic, nice, does really care about things, and someone who engages in half-truths, exaggerations, pretends to listen, but only listening for certain things. It isn't always easy to do that, certainly not at first. But what I would say is when you see a repeated pattern of behavior, sometimes that can be a bit easier. Again, people talk about, why did I not see the red flags? The red flags are not always played out in front of you in a grandiose way. Sometimes they're very subtle and under the radar. But where you see a repeated pattern of behavior where it's all about you having to give something up or give in somehow and give them what they want. When you see their actions privately, when their actions do not match their words publicly, I think that's a good indicator. That's when you start to become a bit more boundary. That's when you start to be a bit more assertive. And depending on the situation, maybe it is just about ending contact, or maybe managing the contact a bit better. Because this is the thing, something I meant to say earlier, it's just popped into my head. When it comes to a narcissistic person, I'll give you an example. If they, again, going back to the enablers, if they were to say something sarcastic or unkind that they claim as a joke, and they say something to publicly embarrass somebody, their partner or a co-worker or whatever it is, and people are uncomfortable with that, but nobody really says anything. They just smile slightly or maybe try to change the subject. To the narcissistic person, that silence, that discomfort has just told them that their behavior is okay. Those people, even though they're trying to be passive, if you will, they're still enabling the behavior, even though they don't want to. And that inaction fuels that narcissist's ego. It fuels their grandiosity, their sense of superiority, and so on. The silence is almost like an approval to them. So if no one's challenging them, it's either because everyone agrees with them, or because everyone's too afraid of them or intimidated to say anything. But one way or another, they're both getting a hit from it. They're in both cases, they're being fed, they're getting away with it. Now, even if no one else is prepared to stand up or say anything, it doesn't mean we can't do it ourselves. I talked about it in many videos. I've done live streams on how to be boundaried, how to be assertive, and how we can manage ourselves and so on. And even if it is just calling it out, saying what it is, asking them to repeat what they've just said in front of everyone, whatever it is, you know, a way of taking the focus off you and putting it back on them. Whatever it is, even if no one else in the room is doing it, it doesn't mean you can't do it yourself. And when other people might chip up with something like, oh, don't, they were only joking. Well, you know, how you deal with that's up to you, but maybe you could say, I'm sure they're able to answer for themselves. They don't need you to do that. And again, it's always about putting it back on them. Okay, so I have probably waffled on enough. I will leave you with one thing. Even if something is public, you see the public face different from the private face, they've got their audience and so on. Even in public, we might think there are other people here, so maybe now's the time to try to reason with them, to bring something up. Even in a public setting, remember, with narcissism, a lot of these traits, especially when there's a personality disorder, the key word is disorder. What we cannot do is we cannot change them. We cannot reason with them. We can't win an argument with them, because what you're dealing with is someone who has an adverse reaction to logic, an adverse reaction to reality. Okay, so how you deal with them, as I say, if you go back and look at some of my previous live streams, there's a lot of tips and techniques in there if you want to have a look at that. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. about the need for enablers, how they recruit the enablers, how they use them, and the different kinds of enablers. Remember, narcissism cannot function without people to enable them. Not all of those people know they're enablers. Again, there can be some who are quite naive. There are some who are quite brainwashed. There are some who are quite terrified. There are some who are every bit maybe as bad as the narcissist themselves. So, again, hope you found that interesting. I am now going to go back to the beginning and I am going to have a look at questions. So I will do the little pop-out chat. There we go. And I will change my glasses so that I can actually see the screen. There we go. Is that what you all look like? Wow, such a handsome crowd. Anyway, let me see if I go back to the beginning. I'm only going back a certain amount. Why am I not seeing everything? Oh, it's top chat. Let me see. All messages. All messages. That's, there we go. Well, to begin with, Tim is saying sometimes the stories get lost in the lies. Yeah. Sometimes you hear that many stories, I don't think even the narcissistic person knows what's true anymore. That being said, I did hear someone, and I couldn't remember who this was for a long time until someone commented on the video. I heard it said once, and it turns out it was actually Dr. Todd Grant, had said, narcissists aren't necessarily telling you, I'm paraphrasing this, it's not that they're telling you lies, they're telling you what they think should be true. Okay. And I think with narcissism, a lot of the time it's what is true in their head at that moment. Okay. They're very whimsical. The truth can change depending on what they need it to be. So where do we get to? Remember, if you have a question, please, question mark makes it easier for me to find. Other than that, I'm just going to jump in people's conversations. Oh, right. Okay. Solo Traveler is asking, the outcomes for the covert narc and scapegoated narc victim are so similar. Is it possible the narc victim can sometimes show behavior similar to a narc? Well, that's an interesting question. First of all, what I would say is all of us to some degree have different kinds of narcissistic traits. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I know there's a bit of controversy around that, but if I put it to you this way, a sense of entitlement. All of us have a sense of entitlement to a certain degree. If you go to work every single day, you're entitled to your salary at the end of the month. If your manager, your boss was to say, I've decided not to pay you this month, sure, I'll pay you next month and we'll see how it goes. No, you wouldn't be okay with that. You've worked for it. You're entitled to your salary. You're entitled to your wages. We all have a sense of entitlement to some degree. With narcissism, what you see is the sense of entitlement among all the other stuff. It's like ramped up to warp speed. It's going through the roof. It's going through the ceiling. It's the entitlement, but without having to earn anything. Okay, that's the difference. They're entitled to it because they're special. You win a race, you're entitled to the trophy. With narcissism, they're entitled to the trophy. They don't even have to enter the race. They just want the trophy. Okay, that's the difference. So what can happen in different situations? All of us, our narcissism traits are going to rise. They're not always going to rise to the level where they're toxic and obnoxious. They might just rise for a short time, but then they'll come down again. You go on a date with someone for the first time. You hope that they're going to like you. Okay. With narcissists, they expect you to like them. You're supposed to like them. We meet that person for the first time. We're trying to impress them. We're trying to tell them funny stories because we want them to like us. Narcissistic people, yeah, they're like that all day and every day with everybody. Okay. Not just someone they hope is going to like them. So when it comes to different situations, some of those traits are going to heighten. What you might find is sometimes people who have been abused for a long period of time, they become defensive. They might become cautious. They can become hyper vigilant. A lot of the behaviors can seem similar. I'll put it this way. A lot of them can look similar, but the motivation behind it is very different. Okay. And the difference is someone who has maybe been abused somehow, they might be overly defensive in some way and overly hypervigilant in some way. But if they do something that offends or upsets someone, they feel bad about it. Okay. Narcissistic person won't. Narcissistic person will only feel bad if it didn't get them what they want or if they're having to face the consequences. Whereas another person would feel bad because maybe they've hurt or offended someone. So some of the behaviors can look similar, but there's a different intent, different motivation, and often a different outcome. And also people who have been hurt with support, with therapy, things like that, what you often find is they start to heal, they start to change, they start to manage things better, they start to manage things differently. With narcissistic personality disorder, it's pretty much going to remain constant. That's not to say there aren't narcissistic people out there who don't benefit from therapy. There are people on YouTube who are diagnosed, they're self-aware, and they've been in therapy for a long time. They do still struggle, but they are trying to put the work in. So there are always exceptions. Generally, with a narcissistic person, there ain't going to be any change. With someone who has been hurt, scapegoated, and things like that, there can be. Okay. I hope that answers that. I hope I answered that okay. One moment, please. I forgot my heater was on. That's probably why I look orange, by the way. Let me see. Where did we get to? Again, if you have any questions, please use a question mark. Solo Traveler again says lots of society enablers. Yeah, sometimes society does, because society, again, people are generally kind and compassionate. So they don't necessarily realize that they are enabling toxic behavior towards someone else or other people. They're only seeing. If you think of social media, you get a lot of narcissistic people putting stuff out there and getting a lot of validation and a lot of likes and a lot of sympathy and a lot of all the stuff that they're trying to be fed, not realizing that, you know, the person that they're bad mouthing, they've probably made their life a misery or something. So anyway, where did we get to? Caught up with 2 friends yesterday. All 3 of us been through narcissistic abuse. Male, female, physical and psychological. Spot on, Darren. Thank you. Colonel Smith. Sorry, Cole Smith. Why did I say Colonel? I sound like a military man, don't I? Yes, sir. Cole Smith. Well, that's good. I'm glad you found this helpful. Angela's asking, don't you think enablers are also narcissists? That's why they help the narcissist. Some of them can be, as I mentioned. Some of them can be every bit as toxic. Others are naive. Others might be frightened. Others might have been brainwashed. Others might be completely innocent. They don't even know that they're helping. As I said, even the person who, you know, maybe smiles uncomfortably or whatever in that situation where someone's being embarrassed, they might think they're trying to keep out of it and they just don't want to make things worse, but they don't realize that that narcissistic person is just being enabled. Now, what I'm not saying is you don't always challenge a narcissist, okay? Because sometimes you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know how far they're going to go. Personally, I think it wouldn't be the first time I've said to someone afterwards, look, there was no need for that. There was no need for what they were saying to you. That must have really hurt, you know. I just acknowledged it so that they didn't feel alone, so that they didn't think maybe it's my narcissism. I didn't want them thinking that I was colluding. Okay. If that's something you want to do, that's entirely up to you, but at least just some kind of acknowledgement. I thought it was the least I could do. So say it's different. It's difficult because you don't always know how a narcissist is going to react. Sometimes you see a lot of emotional dysregulation, can fly into your rage very, very quickly. Let me go. Where'd I get to? Oh, I've just jumped. Slamboyfi, if I've pronounced your name right, I hope I have, says, I've had a few flying monkeys realize and apologize to me. But that's a really good point, especially when you get someone who was naive, someone who didn't know, and the fact that they could acknowledge that. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I can only imagine how validating that would have been to have someone hear or have someone actually apologize because they didn't know. So yeah, it's, I always say people, decent people are there. Decent people are in the world. They do exist. They do walk among us, and sometimes they come out of nowhere. It's amazing. Where do you get to? Okay, again, if I could see a question mark. A person is just saying, true that most cult leaders are the vampires. Yeah, I've heard people saying recently, the very first person I ever heard say it was Richard Grant, but I've heard a few people talk about it differently, and there must be something in it about the legend of the vampire who lives in the dark, doesn't come out in daylight. If you think of daylight, and the light you can see everything, so they stay hidden in the dark. They have to stay in the dark, and they charm and they beguile, and some of the legends, they can't come in. They can't come into your house. They can't come into your room unless you invite them. You have to let them in. So they start to become very charming and very beguiling, and they start to make lots of promises and things like that. And so you welcome them in, and the next thing you know, they are feeding off you. You know, so there's a lot in that legend. It's something I'm going to look more at, because as I say, quite a few people are talking about the legend of the vampire, and as much as they're draining your blood, and I'm just thinking, your blood isn't your blood, it's your life, isn't it? They're draining your life out of you a piece at a time. They don't always kill you in one go. They keep coming back and they keep feeding over and over again. So where do we get to? Let me see. Okay, I'm looking for Sherry Dungan says red flags are sneaky. First one small thing, then another, then another. Yeah, it is a little tiny piece at a time. One thing, if one thing were to be mentioned, again, this is why victims of narcissistic abuse find it very hard to articulate their stories or to try to put across the nature of how narcissists behave. If you were to give an example of something, you know, they wouldn't go to, we had an argument, they wouldn't go to this party. And I pleaded with them would they go, because I didn't want to go on my own. So they came with me. But we had an argument on the way there. Now, if you were to tell that story to anyone, they'd look at you and go, what, really? You had an argument? That's what all this is about? Lots of people have arguments. Best friends have arguments. You know? What they don't get is this series of things. Every time we were about to go out somewhere, at the last minute, they would change their mind and say, I'm not going. So I had to plead with them. And then they would start a fight. And then every social function we went to, I felt destabilized, especially as soon as we got there. They were the heart and soul of the party, and everyone was loving them, and they were getting on great. And I was there in the corner by myself, and people started to think I was the problem. So again, it's very difficult, because if you mention just one thing, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not that big a deal. But what you see is that mentioned earlier, that repeated pattern. Okay, it's a little piece at a time. Just this one compromise. But then here's another one. And now here's another one. And what we find is we're actually becoming conditioned to compromise. Here's a very general example, but I'd say this is more common than you'd think. Narcissists might ask you to lie for them. Now that might be something as simple as saying, you know, I'm off to do whatever it is today. Could you do me a favor? Could you ring in to work for me and tell them I've got a terrible cold, I've got a terrible bad flu or something? Okay. You've just lied for them. And then when they start to accuse you of being a liar, which they usually do, they have evidence. They have evidence that you are a liar because you lied for them. They will take that and they use that against you. So again, it's that little piece at a time, and everything you ever do or say is going to be used against you at some point. So let me see where I get to. Oh, I've just had a big massive jump again. Let me see. Oh, I've just seen someone say Dr. Phil addresses those issues. That's right. I just found out recently that Dr. Phil, I don't know his surname, but he used to be on the television, didn't he? Never actually saw him, but found out that he's on YouTube recently. He's supposed to have some quite good content. I might have to check him out and listen to him and see what he says. Apricity is asking, is it true they were born narcs? This is the thing. I'm not fully up to date in the current research, but there is something to be said for, there is something genetic. There can be something genetic, but then there is also environment. Okay, so it can be the where they were raised, how they were raised, the culture they were raised in, the environment they were raised in, and so on. I think personally it's a bit of both. So there can be a genetic part to it, but then, as I say, it could be the environment they were in. They never got attention at all. They were starved of attention. The only time they got attention was when they acted out. It could have been they never got attention unless they were in some kind of distress or some kind of pain or whatever. It's the only attention mom and dad would give them if they were ill or if they were afraid or whatever. It could have been they were lavished with attention. They had nothing but attention. They were given all the best toys, all the shiniest gadgets, whatever it is. They were told that they were amazing. They were told that they were absolutely fabulous. There was nothing and no one like them. It could be that the only attention they got was for being special. They get a part in the school play. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. Anyone could get in the school play. We don't care. They get the lead role in the school play. Oh, next thing you know, they're absolutely amazing. They're fantastic, you know. So they only got attention if they did the best, if they had the best. So there's a lot of different things could be going on. I've just oh my gosh, Darren. I'll have to listen to this for just that moment. Darren, where did Darren come from? Darren, that sounds very good. You do not know the power of the dark side, young fella. Yeah, Darren, where'd that come from? I always saw myself, if I have ever got a role, if I wanted to be like a Sith Lord, I would always fancy being Palpatine rather than Vader, because Palpatine just has this wonderful way of talking. I like him. So be it, Jedi. Yeah, it just sounds so insidious, doesn't he? But then he is Darth Sidious. So, where did I get to? Every time I go to read something, this jumps. Every time someone puts in another comment, it jumps. Thank you, Darren, for all you do to help us. Fifi Squirrel. I was going to say Squire. Fifi Squirrel, you're very welcome. I'm glad you find it helpful. So where I get to? Let me see if I can find where I was. Greetings from New York City, great metropolis for narcissists and learning life's lessons. Okay. Well, it's a big, massive city. Many million people live in it. So statistically, let me see. Red flags are often way sneakier than people like to admit. It can be dripping in green paint. Absolutely, yeah. We get conditioned to think we're doing a good thing, to think we're doing the right thing. Yeah. And then, pardon me, and we don't recognize that they were red flags until we're suddenly faced with those consequences, the situation that we're now in. Let me see. Let me see. Mary's saying, late the chat, but I'll watch again later. Well, that's good. I'm glad you got something from it. And yes, you can catch up on the playback thing. Yeah. So where did it get to? And big love to you too, Slam Boyfie. I still have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. Where did it get to? Again, question marks make it a lot easier for me to say a question. Ah. I'm not even going to try this one. Is it dictyostelium? I have no idea. So in cases of unkind humor, what could be a decent thing to do? Sarcasm? Who am I to tell anyone what a decent thing to do would be? I think if you think of a narcissist feeding off reactions, I've talked about this quite a few times. Again, when you talk about things like grey rock and so on, when you react to something, especially provocation, if someone is provoking you and if you react, they have control. If you respond, then you have control. Now, sometimes we are going to be sarcastic, and I've been guilty of this too, because we think we're going to get a dig in. We think we're going to get them to be quiet. We think we're going to stand up for ourselves. And maybe there's a time and a place for that. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing. But as I say, even an unkind joke, unkind humor, is there anything unreasonable about asking them to repeat what they've just said? And if they're telling you it's only a joke, well, what part of it do you think was funny? You know, whatever it is, we just keep on giving them their own work to do. Okay. The more we try to, let me put it to you this way. If someone is saying something to you and it's really hurtful or whatever, and it is aimed at embarrassing you, you try to explain why your boundaries are important and why that wasn't funny. Chances are you're not getting anywhere. They're not listening to your word. All they're doing is being fed by the energy. So I often think it's not that we explain why our boundaries are important. We ask them to explain why they think they're not. Okay. So again, with the things like the unkind humor, we just keep giving them their own work to do. Again, ask them to repeat it, ask them to say it again, ask them what that means, ask them, you know, if you're accused of something, could you give me it? I like using stupid. Stupid's not a bad word until you get called it, then it's crushing. But someone says you're stupid and you're supposed to feel small, you're supposed to feel bad. Again, is there anything unreasonable by asking them, what do you mean by stupid? Give me an example of when I've been stupid. Why is it you think that's stupid? So what do you suggest I do? How would that help? We just keep giving them their own work to do. And what you often find is, and again, it depends on the situation. The last thing you want to do is antagonize someone who can be emotionally dysregulated. What you often find is the focus is now off you and it's on them. Everyone's paying attention to them, not you. And that's really uncomfortable. They are getting attention, but not the kind of attention they were hoping for. Other than that, I've been in situations where I've just disengaged. I didn't even smile or nod. I just looked at them, got my coat and left. Wouldn't bother. I wouldn't give them the time of day. So it's really up to you how you handle them. But again, when it comes to decent, if you're going to be sarcastic, if you're going to have a dig, it's the thing. Sometimes there can be playful banter. Someone might say something sarcastic. Someone might say something witty. Someone might be testing to see how far they can go. in cases of humor. If you say something witty back to them and they take it in good faith, they take it in good nature and they laugh themselves, that's different. That's just banter between two people. But if you were to do that and you can see the outrage and you can start to see them shift, they did not get what they wanted, then it's different. Then you know what you're dealing with. You're dealing with someone who's primarily living on their ego. So where did we get to? Somebody RS this is asking, can I send an email about this? What I cannot do, even as a therapist, what I cannot do is I cannot give advice specifically about specific situations and people. That's the thing. There's only so much that I can do, particularly on a live stream and on a YouTube channel. Even as a therapist, therapists can't give advice as such. What I would say is, wherever it is you're based, wherever it is you're from, seek out a therapist. Talk to a therapist wherever you are, wherever you live, and tell them about your story, and they can maybe help you to work through whatever it is you need to work through. Okay, but as for advice, it's generally not something I try to steer, even though it sounds like I'm giving advice sometimes. It's something I tend to have to steer away from. Where did I get to? Teresa in the UK is asking, can they destroy a person, especially a person who has no close relatives or family nearby? Narcissism, I do believe, is a very destructive personality. Destroys everything, destroys people, destroys communities, destroys families, destroys companies, businesses, organizations, destroys countries. It is very, very destructive. When you say about destroying someone, to what degree are you meaning destroy someone? I am a big believer that human beings are stronger and more resilient than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. It doesn't mean we're not hurt. It doesn't mean we're not in pain. It doesn't mean that things haven't changed drastically for us. It doesn't mean that we're not struggling. It doesn't mean we don't have scars. But with the right kind of healthy, let me put it to you this way. I say this so many times. The antidote to toxic people are decent people. As I say, decent people walk among us, and to different degrees, different kinds of decency. With the right kind of support network and the right kind of support, yeah, we can heal, we can move forward, we can get better, we do not have to be that destroyed person forever for that if I put it that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a life sentence. As I say, with the right kind of support. I've done live streams on ways to move forward, on how to reconnect with people, on how to deal with things like the rumination, how to deal with, all the stuff that comes up, the anxiety, the low mood, all the stuff that comes up with that. I've done live streams. If you want to go back, have a look at them. I'm not too proud to say there's other people out there on YouTube that do podcasts, do a better job than I do. They explain it a lot better than I do. If you want to listen to them as well, educate yourself, get some information on the things you can do to help yourself, but also get, as I say, speak to a therapist. Maybe join a forum, a support group, something like that. It doesn't have to be a life sentence, and it doesn't mean it didn't happen or it doesn't matter or anything like that. But we don't have to live the way that narcissistic person wanted us to end up. We don't have to. It's not an easy journey. It's not always in a straight line, and it's not always overnight, but a little piece at a time. I always say that our journeys are a step at a time, and our recovery is a little piece at a time. And we do it with intent, and we pay attention, and we start to notice the little differences as we move along. Okay. Again, you said about no close relatives or family nearby. That could be difficult. If you're able to contact your close friends or family, whether that's by telephone, over the internet, Zoom, whatever it is, maybe try that. But again, different groups, support groups, forums, things like that, and maybe a good therapist as well can help. They're not really a substitute for close relatives or family, but again, decent people are the antidote to toxic people. There is a bit of defiance in this, but I like, maybe it's just because I'm a child of the 80s, but I really like that old Elton John song, I'm Still Standing. Okay, I think there's a bit of defiance in that can give us a little bit of energy. I like that kind of attitude, that I'm still standing, in spite of someone's efforts to ruin us. So where'd I get to? Again, I've just jumped all over the shop here. So where'd I get to? I see if I can find up. HR Death Pod. I've had loads of therapy, which gave me tools. Good. Tools are useful. Yeah. I think different tools and techniques and coping strategies are useful. They're not there to take anything away, but what they are there to do is they are to make the anxiety, if you will, or whatever it is we're struggling with, to help dilute that a little, take the edge of that and make it easy. Not make something easy, but make something easier to do what it is we need to do. And sometimes you find the more you practice these things, the more you do the things you need to do, the more you even expose yourself to the things that you're uncomfortable with, such as maybe assertiveness or whatever it is. The more you expose yourself in little low to no risk situations, and you do it voluntarily, you do it with intent, what you find is you start to become more confident. Your comfort zone starts to widen. Your tolerance for distress will start to increase. You start to become a bit more courageous. So I think tools and strategies and things like that can be helpful for people. Where did it get to? Teresa said, suicide loss survivor here. As a therapist, I do talk to people, and I'm still standing. Good for you, Teresa, and I'm sorry to hear about your loss. There's no such thing as an easy loss or a nice loss. I think loss is bereavement is one of the most difficult things we'll ever experience, regardless of the circumstances, because there's no answer and there's no solution. And I heard someone say this once, and I thought this resonated with me, especially the time I lost my mother. What we're having to do when we're grieving is we're having to adjust to something we really don't want to have to adjust to. There are so many unanswered questions and things like that. It's a terrible thing. But you're still standing, and that's good to know. Warp Dog Record Hound. Record Hound, have you changed your name to Warp Dog as well? I like that. Warp Dog Record Hound. Best revenge is massive success. Frank Sinatra. Yeah. Yeah. And living well. Being okay. Being happy. Yeah. And Apricity says the best revenge is not to become them. Yes. And this is where I'm going to talk about one of my favorite quotes from a book. It's from The Count of Monte Cristo. And just prior to his escape from the Chateau d'If, his friend, the Abbé Faria, just before he dies, gives him the map, says, go find the treasure, have a good life, do good with it, But What he says to him is, do not commit the crime for which you now serve the sentence. I think that's a wonderful piece of advice. We do not become the thing that they accused us of being. We do not become the thing that they were. We do not become like them, thinking that's how to get one over on them. No, we don't. We don't become anything like them. We do not commit the crime for which we serve the sentence, because we're better than that. So let me see. Come towards the end here. I thought it was coming towards the end here. It's just jumped about a good half page. Let's find where. Let me see. Well, if you how do I help my 15-year-old daughter who lives with me now recover? If I could give you a list of things to go and do, I would, but I can't. But if it's your child, what I would say is do what any good parent does. You be the best version of yourself that you can be. Show them authenticity, show them decency. Don't try to force recovery. Don't try and push them along a certain path. Let them find their own way. She's still very young, still very 15. She's still only 15, she's very young. If she has different support there, the school might offer counseling or whatever. Just be the parent that she needs. Ideally, kids would have mum and dad, but it's Sarah Davison, a friend of mine, Sarah Davison, the divorce coach. If you ever want to check out her channel, she's got some really good interviews with some very interesting people. She works with people who are divorcing toxic, narcissistic people. She does a lot of coaching and stuff. She has an online forum, which if you want to give that a go, have a look. A lot of people supporting each other, but a lot of advice and guidance there as well. But something she said is, if the child can't I'm paraphrasing her, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it's something along the lines of, if the child can't have two good parents, then be one good parent, be the best parent you can be for them. Okay. That's as much as we can do, I think. But I say, try Sarah Davison, try her channel, try her website. There's a forum there. You might get some advice and stuff there. Certainly information and advice that I wouldn't have, or I wouldn't be able to get. Healthy self-love. Now, this is an interesting question. As a student of psychology, I ask why we discuss so much of narcissism. What's the point of all these talks when legally no one can do anything unless the actions are illegal? Well, that's a fair point, because I'm not a lawyer, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not illegal to be a narcissist. There's no law against it. Well, the reason I talk about it is because most of the questions I get are about narcissism, but I do talk about other things. But I also think why we talk so much about it, put it this way, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. If we meet someone and we can recognize patterns of behavior, we might be a bit, as I say, forearmed. We have a better idea of, this is not going to be good for me. But then also, a lot of people have been in relationships, or they've worked with people like this. They grew up in families with people with these traits and so on. And even though what they're doing might not necessarily be illegal, if you want to put it that way, it doesn't mean that what they do doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean that what they do doesn't have an impact. It doesn't mean that it can't be detrimental to other people's mental health, their well-being, and so on. And when we human beings, I believe, we don't like things that don't make sense. We like to see cause and effect. We like to see rhyme and reason. We like to be able to put things into nice little compartments. We like to understand. And sometimes the fact that we don't understand can cause us a lot of distress. Even when we're panicking, I always say we're the only animal on this planet that needs to know what to do whenever we don't know what to do. you know, so a lot of people have been in these situations, relationships, environments with someone who makes no damn sense. And yet, all they ever did was hurt them. That can be one of the reasons for why people talk so much about it. There is also a cultural thing. It's like a buzzword at the moment, and there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of anecdotal information as well. This isn't always easy to discern what is the right now. Right kind of information. What I try to do, I haven't done it in a while, but maybe I need to get back to this. What I try to do is to stick to the literature and to talk about how the literature defines it, how the research defines it, but also give examples of what certain things look like and how it manifests and the reasons behind it. So I hope that answers your questions as to why there are so many talks about narcissism. It's about the motivations behind the behavior. It's about the impact of the behavior, but it's also different ways we can try to maybe manage ourselves and keep ourselves even mentally safe from them. So, where do we get to? Right, coming towards the end. Healthy self-love, I did not take your question in a negative way. I didn't take it in a negative way at all. I think it's a fair question, and it's one that I've asked myself many times. It's one that I've even spoken to other YouTubers about as well. So it's not a negative question. It's a fair question. It's an honest question. I appreciate the question, so thank you for asking it. Is a psychopath and a narcissist the same thing? Well, this is controversial because up till now, the literature has talked about cluster B, and we've got borderline, we've got histrionic, narcissism, and antisocial. Psychopathy would maybe come under the umbrella of antisocial behavior. There are distinct characteristics. There is a lot of crossover. Looking at the research of Dr. Karen Mitchell, she is suggesting when it comes to the dark personality type that it is all the same thing to different degrees and in different ways, different types. And it's going to manifest in different ways in different people, in different situations, and for different reasons. Hopefully, I'm going to be talking to Karen soon. Hopefully, I have an invitation out there. She's agreed, so it's really just arranging a date. Or to talk about her research, because I'd be really interested to find out a bit more and go a bit more in depth into what she's found. But anyway, if you look at narcissism and psychopathy, in both cases we see a lack of empathy. With psychopathy, what we commonly see is an absence of empathy, whereas narcissism, it's a lack. So what you might have is like a cognitive empathy. So they're aware when someone's happy and when someone's sad. They can read expressions and things like that. So there is that difference. With narcissism, we see a sense of entitlement. We see them being highly disagreeable. We what else do we see? We see selfishness. We see this belief that they are all powerful and that they deserve all power and so on. There's a lot of envy. They believe others are envious of them, or they should be envious of them, because they're so amazing. With psychopathy, what we see is sort of like a parasitic kind of lifestyle. And that's when they will live off the hard work and the resources of other people. Again, in some cases, it could be stealing. In some cases, it could be, manipulation to get what they need. There's also a callousness. There's this coldness. There is this disregard for the well-being of other people, for their rights, for their safety even. So that would be the differences and the similarities. And what you sometimes find, what we call a malignant narcissist, is when these things are combined. What you also see would be like histrionics, and that's where you would see a lot of the grandiose behavior and so on. That would be the need for attention. Now, sometimes you might find a psychopath who can be very, again, manipulative. They're happy to stay behind the scenes. They don't necessarily want the spotlight. They just want the power and all the trappings that come with it. They're happy to put someone else out in the spotlight. Let them take the credit for it. You know, if people want to think they're getting the credit, fair enough, but I'm the one that's really running the show. There is also sadism. That's with a sadistic person, they take pleasure in the pain and misery of others. They enjoy inflicting it. It makes them feel powerful. But they also just enjoy seeing people in misery. Whether they inflicted it or not, they just love to see people struggling. With a psychopath, what you might find is they can be very cruel and sadistic. And it's not to say they don't get something from it. They might enjoy it. They might get pleasure from it. They might get some kind of a buzz. Other times, they just do it more as a means to an end to get them what they want. If flattery isn't going to work, if bribery isn't going to work, no, I'll terrorize you. I will threaten to destroy you and everything that's precious to you. So there are differences, but there are similarities. There's a lot of crossover as well. And as I say, Karen Mitchell, if you want to have a look at her research, let me see, I could call it up here because I'm currently through reading it. Psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellians, toxic leaders, coercive controllers, subsets of one overarching dark personality type. Okay. Quite an interesting read if anybody wants to have a look at it. And as I say, hopefully I will be talking to Karen at some point in the near future. It'd be very interesting to hear more about that. Just jumped again. Where do we get to? Okay. So I think I've pretty much come to the end because I'm coming up to 10 o'clock. Well, it's 10 o'clock here anyway. I'm going to have to let Freud out, get myself a wee cup of tea, and then go to bed. So everybody, thanks for joining me. As always, I hope you find this interesting. I hope you find it helpful. Looking at how narcissistic people need others. Narcissism cannot function without an audience. It cannot function without enablers. How they attract those enablers and the different kinds of enablers there are. So that'll be me for another week. Sorry I missed you all last week. As you see, I'm now 2 weeks older instead of 1 week. This week, coming out last week, I did a video. What the hell was that video about again? Because I'm doing the second part of it. Oh, yes, the grandiosity, how the grandiosity sometimes manifests, that belief that they're special and entitled and the haughty behavior and so on. This time, I'm going to do the grandiosity, but I'm going to do it from a covert narcissist's perspective. All of it is still there. It is still there. The only difference is a lot of it's internalized. Okay, that's where you see a lot of, with a grandiose narcissist, there's this belief they're amazing, they're special, they're entitled to this, that, and the other. They have the most amazing toys. They have the fastest car. Their daddy can run the fastest. You know, their legs are amazing. Whatever it is. With covert narcissism, this is all internalized, and what you often see is a low mood because they have been treated so badly. They have been cheated out of something. They have sacrificed so much. They want people to see them as unique and special and amazing and the best thing since whatever. But they don't have that haughty, outwardly grandiose behavior. So that will be coming out this week, hopefully tomorrow if I get it done on time. But anyway, again, thanks for joining me, and I will be back again next week. So until I realized I've been slouched down in my chair, I'm only filling half the screen. I must look like a, but then I am only 1'3", so I'm actually small in real life. So everybody, take care. I do waffle, don't I? So again, thanks for joining me, and I will see you all next week. Take care, everyone.